Yeah, I never found that to be a problem. For me, as a student, it forced me. It didn't force me, but it provided a nice petri dish for making really good things. Yeah. Sure. Yeah.
I think you're good.
Science and religion are compatible.
Folks, I'm going to call us to order. I apologize for interrupting your looking at the photographs. I mentioned in the first service this morning that if you spend 5 minutes in front of each one of these photographs, it's going to be like 3 hours plus. And if the presence of the photographs have created problems for some of our activities in this room, like Wednesday evening dinner and so forth, I apologize for that. I think it's possible to have those on the periphery and then also have us Presbyterians eating in a central area here. Well, the title of the exhibit, as you already know, is called Thin Spaces. That is, those places and those moments of experience where the distance between the human and the divine seems to be bridged or seems to be compressed. These photographs are my altars in a way, therefore. They are places I've been and seen and experiences I've had, moments that have informed me, that have moved me in a kind of vertical way from the ordinary to the extraordinary, from the secular to the sacred. And my hope would be, this is really a bold hope, that some of the photographs might do that for you. Even though you didn't take them, seeing their beauty, seeing what's going on there, the interactions, might propel you also in a vertical kind of growth. What I want to do the next 3 occasions, including today, is talk about 3 particular persons who were appreciative of thin spaces, and they lived their lives in that way in regard to their relationship to the natural world, to what we Christians call God's creation. So today we'll deal all too briefly with Francis of Assisi. I mean, we could spend 6 months every Sunday morning learning about Francis of Assisi. And then next week I'll talk about Hildegard of Bingen, one of the most extraordinary persons of the Middle Ages. Certainly a woman ahead of her time, certainly a woman who is very very distinguished. So we'll talk about Hildegard next Sunday. And then finally, on the 26th, we'll talk about the current Pope. Well, why are we talking about a Catholic figure? Because about 10 years ago, probably this spring, he issued a papal encyclical called Laudato Si. Praised be God. And in that, he was calling for all of us to live more appreciatively, whether we're Catholic or Protestant or Presbyterian or Baptist or Methodist, all of us to live more appreciatively of the creation that God has made. A powerful, powerful encyclical. So I'll talk a bit about that. And please remember that Pope Francis got his name from Francis of Assisi, right? When he was elected Pope, one of his friends leaned over to him and said, "Don't forget about the poor, and don't forget about nature." And so he started thinking to himself, what name shall I go by? And so he chose Francis in honor of St. Francis. One more piece of information, and then we at last will begin. Our pastor is sick. And so yesterday at 5 o'clock, we had a communication, not verbal, but text, because he can't talk. This is all of our opportunities to engage him in theological debate because he cannot answer. Can you imagine how much I'm looking forward to that experience? I'm going to also advise his wife, Christy, this is her chance also to win arguments with Kyle, because he cannot say a single word. And even late last night, he was saying, well, I might be able to come tomorrow. I said, Kyle, stay at home. Now, he may make an epiphany at the 11 o'clock service. I don't know. But between the hours of 5 and 10 last night, I wrote a sermon. So he better keep out of that pulpit today, because that caused me to miss the Steelers and the Ravens last night. So that means I've got to keep one eye on you, making sure you behave, and one eye on my watch, because I'll need to get into second service in time, because it begins promptly at 11. So this morning I want to share a few things about St. Francis, and my hope always is, because I enjoy this more than even the actual information presentation, I want to take some of your questions. That's what's most fun for me as a retired professor. So, with that long introduction, let's go ahead and begin. St. Francis of Assisi. Okay, Francis. There we go. Whether you're Catholic or whether you're Protestant, whether you know the saints, whether you don't know the saints, you probably know the name St. Francis, right? The churchman G.K. Chesterton called him the only Christian, and by that he meant the only one who really lived out all the values fully. John Paul II, the late Pope, named him back in 1979, so a lot of years ago, named him the patron saint of ecology. And a famous historian taught in New York at State University of New York at UNESCO, William Cook, said, he's the most depicted Christian saint and the best known figure outside of St. Paul, St. Peter, and the Virgin Mary. That's pretty good press. Well, he was born with the original name Giovanni, or John. His mom was French, his dad was Italian, and she wanted to name him John. Well, Daddy wanted to call him Frenchie, and so it became Francesco Bernardone, or Francis. Born a long time ago in Assisi, 1182, and died about the age of 44 in Assisi in 1226. And here are a couple of icons that you may recognize that famously depict St. Francis. He's born in a beautiful place, a beautiful place. 6 or 7 years ago, I lived with monks at the monastery there in Assisi, thinking I knew some things about St. Francis, and I learned that these Franciscan monks knew a heck of a lot more than I did, and so I listened every day. But it's beautiful. Look at these couple shots I took of the Umbria province in Italy. This is actually a shot that's in the show, as a matter of fact, in the exhibit. Come on. Whoops. It's misbehaving. This is the monastery at Assisi, that is named after St. Francis. Yeah. There we go. St. Francis is born a wealthy guy. His dad is one of the richest cloth merchants in Assisi. And Francis really becomes known as the king of frolic. That is, he's a party guy. He goes around to all the parties, one of the most popular persons. He also has some military aspirations. Remember, in those days, in the 13th century, the notion of being a knight was really aspiration. You know, I wanted to be an NBA player. That didn't happen. I wanted to be a professional photographer for National Geographic. That didn't happen. I wanted to be a spy like James Bond, driving fast cars. That never happened. Well, St. Francis wanted to be a knight, and that also ain't going to happen as well. So he has military aspirations. He's captured by the Perugians, that is a city in the same vicinity as Assisi. He tries it again with another military campaign. He returns home. They kind of make fun of him. He's not been successful, and so forth. But then he has a tremendous change and transformation. He's 25 years old, and he basically eschews his wealth. He goes into St. Damian's church, and he has an experience. He believes that he hears the voice of Jesus saying to him, "Repair my church. Repair my church." What he does initially is take that to be the local church. And St. Damian's at that time was in utter disrepair. So he goes ahead and buys building stones from masons in the area, even taking some of Daddy's cloth and selling that and taking the money to buy the stones. Also selling his horse, that was a gift from Daddy, and taking the money from that to buy some building materials for St. Damian's. Well, the changed Francis is as popular with his family as a Clemson fan in Columbia. Dad is upset by all this. He beats his son up and he locks him in the dark closet. Then he takes him to court. Doesn't take him to the civil court, takes him to the church court, the ecclesiastical court, before a bishop whose name is Guido. Francis takes a stand and makes a dramatic announcement in the sense that he was ordered to give back to his father everything that he had taken from his father and sold to make money to repair St. Damian's. And Francis basically stands on the town square, takes off all of his clothes, and says, "My only father is my Father in heaven." And he runs out of the town square singing songs in French. French was the preferred language for the elite, the intellectuals of the time, and not Italian. And simply, he and his dad are never reconciled. So he renounces his wealth and his status. This is a very, very famous fresco by the Italian painter Giotto. And if you look down in the lower portion, you can see him there, Francis, not entirely disrobed. There could be no X-rated particular painting at that time, but you see him, he's taking off his clothes on the square. Then he dedicates himself to the poor. So he gives his cloak to a poor person. He also embraces lepers, who were extremely outcast at the time. He really makes a tremendous reversal there, because he used to not be able to even look at lepers. And when we would go by the places where lepers were gathered together, the smell was such that he couldn't stand it. Well, later he actually goes and lives among the lepers and ministers unto them. He takes on intentionally the values of humility, poverty, and simplicity. And these were passages that really spoke vividly to St. Francis. And I'll read them to you quickly from Matthew 19. If you want to be perfect, go sell your possessions and give to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. Then come, follow me. Or from Matthew chapter 16. If anyone would come after me, he must deny himself or herself and take up his or her cross and follow me. Or Matthew chapter 10. Do not take any money in your money belts, no gold or silver, not even copper coins. And Francis was so concerned about money and the new wealth that came about in the 13th century in Italy that he would not allow his followers even to touch money, let alone use it for commerce. This was one of his famous passages as well that he really enjoyed. And I won't read the whole thing, but you'll recognize it from Matthew 25, the words of Jesus, when basically, if you didn't see the face of Jesus, in the face of the poor or the hungry or the prisoner or whatever, then you really denied Christ. A quick story to illustrate. Several of you know that a number of years ago I worked with Mother Teresa, and I asked Mother Teresa what it was that allowed her to work with people who were disfigured and diseased and forgotten. And she said, I can't even imitate her Albanian accent, but it was pretty pronounced. Little lady, 4'11", so I towered over her. She said, Cliff, I see the face of Jesus on all of these people. And that's how she was able to do her job. An echo of St. Francis of Assisi. I love this phrase. And as the guest preacher today at the church, I got to really take these seriously. Preach the gospel at all times, when necessary, use words. I like that. Preach the gospel at all times, when necessary, use words. Well, Francis then went to see the Pope. It was Innocent III during his particular lifetime. And he wanted to form a new order. He wanted to call them the Friars Minor. And he used the word les jongleurs pour Dieu, that is, fools for God. Fools for God. And I'm remembering that passage from the New Testament that says we are fools for Christ's sake. We are fools for Christ's sake. I remember somebody told me one time when I was standing up for something that they thought was good, but I was probably stupid for standing up for it on the campus where I was teaching. And they said, don't be such a fool for Christ's sake. And I said, I am a fool for Christ's sake. See the difference? You may wonder where this business of the nativity scene came from. And in my house, it's still up because I want my son to come and visit finally his father down from Asheville, where they had a bunch of snow, where they had devastation. His Christmas gifts are still under the tree. I'm not taking down that tree until my son visits, and I'm not dismantling my manger scene until my son comes and visits. It may be July 4th by the time my son comes, but by golly, that tree's going to be up. But you may wonder where the manger scene came from. That was all the work of St. Francis. He was the one who thought that up, that you'd have live animals and so forth around the creche. So he did that in 1223. In 1224, he focused so much on the wounds to Christ's hands that he himself developed what's called the stigmata. That is, he developed depressions and wounds in his hands as well. So you can see that depicted in this painting. Well, something about thin spaces. You have to contrast Francis's perspective with the dominant perspective of his time. So he lived in the medieval period, 13th century. The typical medieval view was this. Now think about what this would mean if this is the way you thought about it. Nature is evil. It is the domain of the devil. And a few episodes of the bubonic plague, which would kill nearly half the people in Europe, beginning way back in the 15th century, well, after in the 15th century, you can think about how they would be regarding the natural world as evil. Now, nature could kill you, because here comes another round of the bubonic plague. And one example was, if they saw blackbirds like crows flying in the air, those were the messengers of the devil. Think about how Francis is going to regard birds in his particular perspective. You're going to see a fresco in just a moment that depicts him preaching to the birds. He found them worthy subjects of being able to hear the gospel of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. So, by comparison to the typical view of his time, here's Francis. Nature is holy because God the Creator is holy. And so, he would take little worms off the sidewalk that were lying in front of him. A couple times he saw lambs that were being taken to market to be sold and to be butchered, and he bought the lambs. A couple times he also freed birds that were in cages. And according to the story, he encouraged the birds not to be so stupid as to get caught again and let them fly off. The medieval period also viewed nature as being a storehouse of natural resources. Sometimes even today, I think we fall into that category, right? Nature is a vast storehouse of resources. Its purpose is there for us. We can use them however we want. We can use them with no restraint, with no consideration, and so we abuse nature. The way Francis saw it was nature was a family, not a vast storehouse of resources, but nature is a family composed of brothers and sisters with all family members. So he would always talk about brother and sister birds or brother and sister fish. And in that, he reminds me of Native American perspectives, which used to always look at the natural world as peoples. So you'd have human peoples and fish peoples and bird peoples and cattle peoples and horse peoples and so forth. But we were all subjects. We were all peoples together. So the medieval view of the time was nature was filled with objects. Objects to be manipulated and used. For Francis, nature was filled with subjects with whom we need to choose to relate wisely. One of the most famous things I think of that distinguishes Francis from his time period is the typical medieval view was nature lies below us. And in the medieval period, if you can think of it being a kind of equilateral triangle like this, coming down like this across. At the top is God, then the angels, then human beings, the male, then human beings, the female, then animals, then plants, and finally stones. And as you moved up, each one of those gained value over the ones below. Hence there was the sense that, or dare I say this, barrister, women were pieces of property owned by their fathers at birth, owned by their husbands upon marriage, and then owned by their eldest son should their husband precede them in death. Francis's view, because you can see what happens as you move down, each thing has lower and lower value. For Francis, it was more like democracy. Can you see that on the other side of the pictures? I'm noticing that's pretty low down. He saw nature as a kind of wagon wheel. If you took one of those wagon wheels that I used to see on all the cowboy shows when I was growing up, you know, it had a center spoke and it had, a center hub and it had spokes coming out, right? If you were to lay that down on its side, then you'd have the center hub and you'd have these things coming out. Well, Francis put God in the middle as the hub, and then all living things are spokes. But see, they're all on a horizontal level, so they're all to have a special equal value. So it's a democracy in that sense, not a hierarchy. Does that make some sense? So he took exception to the medieval view. According to his biographer, Bonaventure, in the most famous biography, There have been several written, and then there are several biographies since that time written by contemporary historians. But according to this early one on, Francis saw nature as a series of footprints leading to God. So as you looked at the natural world, if you looked intently enough, you would see God. An analogy would be, if you look at these photographs, you learn something about me. You do. You don't learn everything about me, but you can see what I value. You can see certain things that are important to me. So Francis believed by looking at the natural world, we could learn some things about God. And he wrote then, close to the end of his life, the famous Canticle of the Creatures with Brother Sun and Sister Moon. He did that, remember he died in 1226. He died on October 3rd, 1226. So slightly a year before, September of 1225, he writes this canticle. And I will take time to read this, because that'll still give us time for some questions, but it's beautifully done. Here's what he has to say, the Canticle to the Sun and Moon. Most high, all-powerful, all good Lord, all praise is yours, all glory, all honor, and all blessings. To you alone, Most High, do they belong, and no mortal lips are worthy to pronounce your name. Praised be you, my Lord, with all your creatures, especially Brother Sun, who is the day through whom you give us light. And he is beautiful and radiant with great splendor. Of you, Most High, he bears the likeness. Praised be you, my Lord, through Sister Moon and the stars, and the heavens you have made them bright, precious, and fair. Praised be you, my Lord, through brothers wind and air, and fair and stormy, all weather's moods, by which you cherish all that you have made. Praised be you, my Lord, through Sister Water, so useful, humble, precious, and pure. Praised be you, my Lord, through Brother Fire, through whom you light the night, and he is beautiful and playful and robust and strong. Praised be you, my Lord, through our sister Mother Earth, who sustains and governs us, producing varied fruits with colored flowers and herbs. Praised be you, my Lord, through those who grant pardon for love of you and bear sickness and trial. Blessed are those who endure in peace by you, Most High. They will be crowned. Praise be to you, my Lord, through Sister Death, from whom no one living can escape. Woe to those who die in mortal sin. Blessed are they she finds doing your will. No second death can do them harm. Praise and bless my Lord, and give him thanks, and serve him with great humility. So a couple of pictures that will bring back maybe some memories for you of St. Francis, or instruct you in some things about him. Wherever you see St. Francis portrayed, he's always portrayed with animals. Always the birds, and always the other particular animals around him. Maybe the most famous story is when he preaches to the birds. And so these are a couple of depictions, a more modern one on the left, and then one that comes back from the late Middle Ages on the right. The Wolf of Gubbio. Oh my goodness, the Wolf of Gubbio. This bears saying something about in terms of elaboration. There's a wolf, and he is simply attacking villagers in the town of Gubbio. And they're going to have to kill the wolf. No. St. Francis goes, according to the story, it's a charming story. And he talks to the wolf, and he basically says, cut it out. Quit eating human beings. We got a deal here. If you keep doing that, they're going to kill you, so stop and you're going to live. And of course, according to the story, the wolf ceases and desists from its lethal behavior, and everybody lives in harmony. I love that story. Well, moving quickly to the end so we have time for some questions and comments. He dies on October 3rd, 1226 at the age of 44. He's such a significant person that within 2 years of his death, he is canonized by Pope Gregory IX. Think about how long it takes for that canonization process to unfold. It's not even 2 years that it takes for Francis to be well, one of the most famous prayers that we can't say from a historical perspective that we genuinely can say Francis wrote this, but it's been attributed to him, and you know that one, Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. I won't take time to read all of that. So I mentioned before that Pope Francis, when it came time for him to choose what his name was going to be, his papal name, he chose Francis of Assisi. Francis of Assisi deserves a lot more words and a lot more elaboration than that, but I want to stop there so that we can talk together about certain things that have struck you or certain questions that may have emerged, and I'll do my best to answer those questions and take them now. So what are you thinking about St. Francis in Thin Spaces, or St. Francis, this rather unusual person to say?
Was he a part of the monastery that you showed a while ago?
That monastery was... He did. That monastery was established in his honor, and all of the monks who were there are Franciscans.
He was not a part of a monastery during his time on earth, or was he?
He had a group of friars. This monastery was built a century or two after him. So, and when I was in Italy, I lived with the monks there and learned a lot about St. Francis. No. He had a group, and they were wanderers. They wandered around, and they kind of slept on the ground, and so it wasn't any kind of special monastery building at that time. Thank you, Bob. Yeah, what other questions might you have? Again, I'll try my best to answer them. I may not know the answers to every one of them.
What illness did he?
I'm sorry?
What illness did he have?
But the question was, what illness did Francis have? He just wore out his body. He just wore out his body. He was a person who fasted regularly. He was a person who did not take care for certain things that were happening to him. He just kind of lived his life and lived it connectedly, and he just simply died prematurely at the age of 44. Yeah. But by contrast, we talk about Hildegard of Bingen. She lives for a number of years because as a nun, she practices moderation. The person who was her elder, who was teaching her, lived a life like St. Francis, and she died very prematurely as well. But Hildegard practiced a more moderate life and lived a longer period of time. So Francis just wore out his body.
Do you still fast?
Oh, do I still fast? What my friend is talking about is, for a long time, I will roll the die on Sunday. And whatever number it comes up, that's my fast day for the subsequent week. And then I do drink, but I do not eat food, and the money I save I then give to charity. So I've done that for, goodness, more time. What do I drink? That's between me and God. No, I drink water. I drink water, and I drink things to keep the electrolytes going. Oh, you rascal! I was worried you might have. Yeah, no, some things can't be resisted. Some temptations cannot be resisted. I understand. What else do you think you were wondering about or want to ask?
I know when he started, started his ministry. Was he in his 20s or?
He was 25. He was 25. Yeah. He was 25.
So he had 20 years.
Yeah. So he did about 20 years. It's very interesting to me, as a person who taught world religions at the university level. There's a really profound similarity between Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, and St. Francis. Both are born into privilege. Both are wealthy. The description of the Buddha was that he was born not in a stable out beside a crowded inn, like Jesus of Nazareth, but he was born into a golden net held by maids in waiting. His mother gave birth to him without experiencing any pain. He was a member of the Kshatriya caste, and so he had dancing girls, he had wine and drink, he had the greatest music, he was trained in the martial arts, he was an expert archer, and he gave it all up. Because he reached a point in time where he wondered about life. Is this the meaning of life? And I don't want to lecture on Siddhartha Gautama the Buddha, but he sees four sights that disturb him. 4 sights, that is S-I-G-H-T-S, he sees 4 things, that disturb him. And he thinks, there's suffering in the world, and how can that be? And I need to find the answer to that. And so he renounces his wealth and station in life and heads out. And Francis does the same thing a number of years later. The Buddha is 6th century BC, and of course, Francis is the 13th century AD. So he reminds me of Siddhartha Gautama Buddha, the way that Mother Teresa reminds me of Francis in time, in terms of identifying with the face of Jesus on those people who need your help. What else are you thinking? Yeah, please, Andrew.
You mentioned briefly that he developed marks in his hands and feet.
Yes.
Could you kind of go into more detail about that?
Yeah, I can try. What we're discovering today, Andrew, is there's an incredible connection between our mind and our body. And you're a former athlete, so you know this. Your attitude, toward things can determine how your body functions. And some people who experience lots of stress and you develop ulcers and people who don't take care of their bodies in terms of good nutrition and so forth, that negatively affects their brain development. And Doc, you would know this far better than I, but there is this vivid relationship between, a dynamic relationship between your mind and your body, your spirit, your soul, and so forth and so on. So he so focuses on the passion of the Christ, Andrew, that these marks appear in his hands. The marks of crucifixion of Christ. And that's probably the best we can do in terms of analyzing it. But we do know that it happened. I mean, there are paintings of that happening. There are descriptions of it in the biographers who have written about St. Francis. So that's how focused he was on Christ. That those marks of persecution and suffering became marks that he bore on his hands.
Cliff,
Yes, please.
we have a little porcelain statue of St. Francis with birds on his arms. It used to be in the Boxdale room, but I think now it's in the Sojourner Sunday School class. A little porcelain statue of St. Francis.
And in my backyard, I've got a concrete kind of molded thing, and it sits back there, and there's St. Francis, and them our birds are all around him, right? And I was thinking, I just put a bird feeder up in my backyard because I was concerned about the birds not having food. Not a blankety blank bird has come by my house. But I see that portrayal of St. Francis. He's got birds all over him. So I think it'll take a while before the word gets around in my neighborhood that I'm the soft touch. And all the birds, not even the squirrels are coming by. That's how repugnant they are finding my bird feeder. So, yes, please.
How did you come to live in a monastery? Tell me how that happened.
Oh, okay. Sometimes you want to learn about something. It becomes important to spend time with people who are from that tradition or who have that perspective on things. So, for example, when I wanted to learn about world religions, I'm trained as a Christian systematic theologian. God help me. But I'm trained as a systematic theologian. But when I went to teach in university, they want Christian systematic theology once every 3 years as a course, and they want world religions every single semester. I wasn't trained in that, so I had to go learn. So I went and lived among people who came from different faith traditions. So I lived in Jerusalem, and I lived in a variety of places. To do the same thing with St. Francis, I thought, I'm not Catholic, I'm Protestant, and I don't know more than just 2 or 3 saints that I can count on one hand, right? So if I want to learn about St. Francis, where do you learn about that? Well, you live with the Franciscans, and I thought, what better place than Assisi? So as a part of a sabbatical, I lived with the monks there at Assisi. So that's a long answer to your question, but that kind of thing changes your life. I'm giving a talk on Islam this Tuesday for the McKissick Study Group. And it's called Conceptions and Misconceptions about Islam. I think it's the most misunderstood religion in the world today. I'm going to try to correct, but I only know that stuff by living among them. So when I lived among the Franciscans, I thought I knew a lot about Francis. I didn't know nothing compared to these monks, who had spent their whole lives studying this person who was the master of their particular religious order, the Order of Scribe, or the gens the jesters of the fools. So, thank you for that question. I think there's no better way sometimes to learn things than to have direct connection. Direct connection. Somebody else, yeah, please.
Since St. Francis is from a wealthy family, what type of formal education did he have, or was he
Oh, thank you for asking. Yeah.
What was the question?
Oh, I'll repeat the thing about. The question was, what kind of education did Francis have? None at all. In fact, it was said of Francis, when he wrote 5 words in Latin, 2 or 3 of them were wrong. And of course, Latin being the way that you wrote things back then. The kind of education that dominated the university at the time was called scholasticism. And scholasticism basically said, we're going to bring our intellectual reason to understanding things. And a lot of these things can be proven, whether it's the existence of God or whatever else, but use a rational mind and prove that. Well, even today, as a philosopher, I like to say, you really can't prove God beyond the shadow of a doubt, and you can't disprove God beyond the shadow of a doubt. It really comes down to being a matter of faith. You take that trust, you take that leap of faith, as Søren Kierkegaard, the Danish philosopher, would have put it. So, what Francis did, he basically said, too much education is not good for you. And I stand here, I have 2 doctorates, and I'm thinking, well, what would Francis say about that? He would say, too much education is not good for you. But the point is that he was a lay person at that point who became a monk who did not avail himself, for whatever reason, of a university education. And of course, women were forbidden that at that time. And he could have gone because his parents had moolah, right? They could have sent him to university. He didn't. And so what it does for me sometimes, when I write things, or when I think about things, and I have Francis kind of looking over my shoulder, I think, well, I'll say it this way. When I lived in the Netherlands, there was a woman who hid Jews. And her name was Corrie ten, you can say it in English, Corrie ten Boom. It's actually Corrie ten Boom. And I asked Corrie one time in her watch shop about this, and if God was this way, and had this happened to the Jews, and you're an evangelical Christian, and you look after them and hid them, and how's this all come together to make sense? And she said, stop. Holte, she said in Dutch, Holte. And I said, okay. And she said, Kiss. Oh, is this elderly woman going to kiss me, or what's going on here? She said, keep it simple, stupid. So, as much as I value education, and I do, sometimes you have to just kind of think, is this education fortifying and increasing my faith? Is it getting in the way with obstacles and different kind of things? Because ultimately in life, I just need to keep it simple, stupid. I need to love God and love other people. And the theological details of that, I can work out. But love God and love your neighbor, that's what it's all about. So Francis would say, you finally got it, Cliff. You finally got it. What else do you think? And then we better call time out because I need to get ready for that.
Did he address women of race?
Oh, thank you. He did not address the issue of race. He did address the issue of women. There was a young woman whose name was Claire. And she wanted to be a follower of St. Francis. And of course, men and women, women are down here now. What he did was establish an order for women. It was called the Order of Poor Clares. C-L-A-R-E-S. That was her name. And when he died on the floor of this church, St. Damian's, she was there with him to comfort him in the last hours of his life. So that's what he did in terms of women. Yes, you get the last question, John.
Roberto Rossellini, the Italian director, made a film about St. Francis called Flowers of St. Francis, I think, and it's quite reverential, actually, and it just illustrates, I think, 4 or 5 incidents in his life.
Yeah, what John just said was that there is a film out, and you said by Rossellini, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was made.
Yeah, I think it's just called Brother, Sun, Sister, Moon or something. And it is a wonderful reverential depiction of St. Francis. And there have been some other films as well. When I was doing my research on Francis, and some of you know I have a chapter in a book of mine on St. Francis. I looked at these different films to see how they tried to capture this particular figure, who, whether you're Catholic or Protestant, probably looms as the #1 saint, right? You ask Catholics, in fact, I was talking to Catholics about Hildegard of Bingen once, and one of the Catholics said, "Who?" I said, "Well, she's one of yours." And he said, but nobody has second thoughts, nobody has questions about Saint. Everybody knows Saint Francis, just like most everybody knows about Mother Teresa. Well, as an old university coach, we better call a time out here. Thank you for being here. We'll do some time together on Hildegard of Bingen next Sunday. In the meantime, now or later, come by and look at the photographs, because Francis lived in the thin spaces. If it even had photography back then, he would have looked at these things and said, okay, I think I'm kind of getting it, you know. Life is interconnected, and there are certain moments that lift us up, and we see the footprints of God in the natural world around us and in exchanges between human beings. So try to see the photographs as working in that particular direction. And I'll spend time now getting ready for my hour-and-a-half sermon. That will No, Kyle said I only have 20 minutes. Okay. Thank you very much for being here today.